I'm Maya Chen, 29, and the moment I watched my boss present my code as his own masterpiece to a room full of investors, I knew exactly how I was going to make them all pay. 6 months of 18-hour days, endless debugging sessions, and sacrificing my social life had led to this: watching Derek Martinez claim credit for the revolutionary healthcare app that was 90% my creation. But what they didn't know was that buried deep in the authentication module, I had left myself a little insurance policy, a single line of code that could bring their entire demo crashing down with just one click from my laptop. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The story begins 3 years earlier, when I first walked into the gleaming offices of Health Tech Innovations, clutching my computer science degree and dreams of changing the world through technology. The startup occupied 2 floors of a converted warehouse in Austin, Texas, complete with exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and the mandatory ping-pong table that every tech company seemed legally required to have. I was employee number 15, hired as a junior developer with promises of growth, equity, and the chance to work on cutting-edge healthcare solutions. My interviewer was Derek Martinez, the company's chief technology officer, a smooth-talking 35-year-old who had somehow convinced everyone he was a coding genius despite having graduated with a business degree and spending most of his previous career in sales. During our interview, he spoke passionately about disrupting healthcare through innovative technology, using buzzwords like synergy and revolutionary paradigm shifts with the confidence of someone who had clearly memorized a TED talk. I should have recognized the red flags then, but I was young, eager, and desperately needed the job after months of unemployment following graduation. Maya, we're looking for someone who can think outside the box, Derek had said, leaning back in his ergonomic chair with his arms crossed behind his head. Someone who isn't afraid to challenge conventional thinking and push boundaries. From your portfolio, it looks like you might be exactly what we need. I had spent weeks preparing for this interview, building small applications and studying the company's existing products. Their main offering was a basic patient management system that looked like it had been designed in the early 2000s, complete with clunky navigation and a user interface that would make even the most patient healthcare worker want to throw their computer out the window. I knew I could do better, much better. I've actually been looking at your current patient management system, I said, pulling out my laptop to show him a prototype I had built over the weekend. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in the user experience and the underlying architecture. I've created a demo that addresses some of the major pain points I identified. Derek's eyes lit up as I walked him through my prototype, showing him how the interface could be streamlined, how the database queries could be optimized, and how the overall user experience could be transformed from frustrating to intuitive. He asked intelligent questions and seemed genuinely impressed with my technical approach. By the end of the interview, I was convinced I had found the perfect place to launch my career. Maya, I think you're going to fit in perfectly here, Derek said as he walked me to the elevator. We'll have an offer letter to you by the end of the week. Welcome to the team. The first few months at Health Tech Innovations were everything I had hoped for, and more. I was assigned to work on improving the existing patient management system, and I threw myself into the project with the enthusiasm of someone who finally had the chance to prove herself. I stayed late, came in early, and spent my weekends reading technical documentation and experimenting with new approaches to solve complex problems. My direct supervisor was Jennifer Walsh, a senior developer in her 40s who had been with the company since its founding. Jennifer was brilliant, patient, and genuinely interested in helping me grow as a programmer. She reviewed my code with careful attention to detail explaining not just what needed to be changed, but why, helping me understand the broader implications of different architectural decisions. "Maya, you have real talent," Jennifer told me during one of our weekly one-on-ones. "Your code is clean, efficient, and you have an intuitive understanding of user experience that's rare in someone so early in their career. Keep this up, and you'll go far in this industry." The validation meant everything to me. Growing up, I had always been the quiet kid who preferred computers to people, spending hours in my bedroom writing simple programs and building websites for imaginary businesses. My parents, both accountants, had been supportive but puzzled by my career choice, often asking when I was going to find a real job that didn't involve staring at screens all day. Landing this position and receiving positive feedback from experienced professionals felt like proof that I had chosen the right path. As months passed, I began taking on increasingly complex projects. When the company decided to build a mobile companion app for the patient management system, I volunteered to lead the development effort. When they needed someone to integrate with third-party medical device APIs, I taught myself the necessary protocols and built robust, secure connections. When performance issues plagued the main application, I dove deep into database optimization and reduced query times by 70%. Each success brought more responsibility and more recognition from Jennifer and the other senior developers. But I began to notice that Derek seemed to take particular interest in my projects, often scheduling impromptu meetings to discuss my progress and asking detailed questions about my technical approaches. At first, I was flattered by the attention from the CTO, interpreting it as a sign that my work was being noticed at the highest levels of the company. "Maya, your mobile app architecture is really impressive," Derek said during one of these meetings. "Walk me through your authentication system again. I want to make sure I understand all the security implications before we present this to the board." I explained the OAuth implementation, the token refresh mechanisms, and the encryption protocols I had chosen for sensitive medical data. Derek took detailed notes, asking follow-up questions that demonstrated he was paying close attention to every technical detail. I assumed he was being thorough in his role as CTO, ensuring that our security met industry standards before deployment. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need more of around here," Derek said. "I'm going to make sure the board knows about the excellent work you're doing." The company was growing rapidly, securing new funding rounds and expanding into additional markets. With growth came new challenges and new opportunities. The board of directors decided that health tech innovations needed a flagship product, something revolutionary that would distinguish us from the dozens of other healthcare technology startups competing for market share. Derek called an all-hands meeting to announce the new initiative. "Team, we have an incredible opportunity ahead of us," Derek announced to the assembled staff of now nearly 50 employees. "We're going to build something that will fundamentally change how healthcare providers interact with patient data. This isn't just an incremental improvement. This is a complete reimagining of healthcare technology." The project, internally codenamed Phoenix, was ambitious in scope. We would build a comprehensive healthcare platform that combined patient management, electronic health records, telemedicine capabilities, medical device integration, and artificial intelligence-powered diagnostic assistance into a single, seamless application. It was the kind of project that could define a company's future, potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars if executed successfully. Derek outlined the project timeline. We had 18 months to build, test, and launch Phoenix, with a major product demonstration scheduled for the annual Health Tech Summit, the industry's most important conference. Success at the summit could lead to partnerships with major hospital systems, substantial investment from healthcare-focused venture capital firms, and the kind of industry recognition that transforms startups into market leaders. Failure would likely mean the end of health tech innovations as a viable company. "I'll be leading the technical architecture for Phoenix," Derek announced. "Maya, Jennifer, and the rest of our development team will be implementing my vision under my direct supervision." I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was exactly the kind of project I had dreamed of working on since college, a chance to build something truly innovative that could improve lives for millions of patients and healthcare providers. But the timeline was aggressive, and the technical challenges would be substantial. Success would require every member of the development team to perform at their absolute best. Over the following weeks, Derek held a series of planning meetings to define the technical architecture for Phoenix. He presented detailed diagrams showing how different components would interact, outlined the database schema, and specified the API design patterns we would follow. His presentations were polished and comprehensive, demonstrating what appeared to be deep technical knowledge of complex healthcare systems. "Maya, I want you to take the lead on the core patient data management module," Derek said during one of these planning sessions. "It's the foundation that everything else will build on, so it needs to be absolutely bulletproof. I trust you to handle this critical component." I was honored to be given such an important responsibility, but as I began digging into the technical requirements, I realized that Derek's architectural plans had some significant flaws. The database design he had specified would create performance bottlenecks as the system scaled. The API structure he had outlined would make it difficult to integrate with existing hospital systems. The security model he had chosen would not meet the strict compliance requirements for healthcare data. During our next team meeting, I raised these concerns as diplomatically as possible. "Derek, I've been analyzing the database architecture for the patient data module, and I think we might want to reconsider some of the design decisions. I've identified a few potential scaling issues that could cause problems down the road." Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained friendly. "Maya, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I've spent months researching these architectural decisions. I'm confident that the design I've specified will meet our needs. Let's stick with the plan as outlined." "I understand, but I've run some preliminary tests, and the query performance is going to degrade significantly once we have more than a few thousand patient records. If we modify the schema slightly, we can avoid these bottlenecks entirely." "Maya," Derek's tone became firmer, "I need you to trust my experience here. I've been doing this a lot longer than you have, and I've seen what works and what doesn't. Please implement the design as specified." I could feel the tension in the room as other team members exchanged glances. Jennifer gave me a subtle shake of her head, warning me not to push the issue further. I reluctantly agreed to follow Derek's specifications, but privately decided to document my concerns and proposed solutions in detailed technical memos that I would file away for future reference. As development began in earnest, I threw myself into the project with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I arrived at the office before anyone else and stayed long after most of my colleagues had gone home. I worked weekends, holidays, and vacation days, driven by a combination of professional ambition and genuine excitement about what we were building. The patient data management module was incredibly complex, requiring integration with dozens of different medical record formats, compliance with multiple healthcare data standards, and optimization for the kind of real-time performance that hospital systems demanded. The more I worked on the project, the more I realized that Derek's original architectural plans were not just flawed, but fundamentally unsuitable for the scale and complexity of what we were trying to accomplish. I began implementing my own solutions, quietly redesigning core components to address the problems I had identified during the planning phase. I told myself that I was still following Derek's overall vision while making necessary technical improvements that he would undoubtedly appreciate once he saw the results. My modified architecture performed brilliantly during internal testing. Database queries that should have taken seconds under Derek's original design completed in milliseconds. The API endpoints I had restructured handled concurrent requests with grace and stability. The security implementation I had developed exceeded industry standards while maintaining the usability that healthcare providers required. I was proud of the work I was doing and confident that my improvements would be recognized and celebrated when the project was complete. Meanwhile, Derek seemed to be spending most of his time in meetings with investors, partners, and board members, presenting updates on Phoenix's progress and building excitement for the eventual launch. He would occasionally drop by my desk to ask about specific technical details, always framing his questions as quality assurance rather than genuine curiosity about my design decisions. "Maya, how's the authentication system coming along?" he would ask. "Walk me through the token validation process one more time. I want to make sure I can explain it accurately to the board." I would patiently explain my implementation, often spending 30 or 40 minutes going through code examples and architectural diagrams. Derek would take careful notes, asking insightful follow-up questions that suggested he was developing a deep understanding of my work. I assumed these conversations were part of his management responsibilities, ensuring that he could speak knowledgeably about our technical progress to company leadership and external stakeholders. As we approached the halfway point in our development timeline, it became clear that Phoenix was going to be something truly special. The application was fast, intuitive, and packed with innovative features that I had never seen in healthcare software. The artificial intelligence components I had developed could analyze patient symptoms and suggest potential diagnoses with remarkable accuracy. The telemedicine interface I had built provided crystal-clear video calls with integrated access to patient records and diagnostic tools. The mobile components allowed healthcare providers to access critical information from anywhere, with offline capabilities that ensured continuity of care even in areas with poor internet connectivity. Jennifer was consistently impressed with my progress. "Maya, this is some of the best work I've ever seen from any developer at any level," she told me during one of our weekly reviews. "You're not just implementing features, you're solving fundamental problems that have plagued healthcare technology for decades. This application is going to change everything." The validation from Jennifer meant the world to me, but I was even more excited about the potential impact of our work. I had spent countless hours researching healthcare workflows, interviewing nurses and doctors, and studying the pain points that made technology a hindrance rather than a help in medical settings. Phoenix addressed every major issue I had identified, combining powerful functionality with an interface so intuitive that busy healthcare providers could master it in minutes rather than weeks. As we moved into the final 6 months of development, the pressure intensified dramatically. Derek began scheduling daily progress meetings, scrutinizing every aspect of our work, and demanding detailed status reports on each component of the application. He seemed particularly interested in the areas where I had made significant architectural improvements, asking probing questions about implementation details and performance characteristics. "Maya, I need you to document everything you've built," Derek said during one of these meetings. "Create comprehensive technical specifications for each module, including code comments, architectural diagrams, and performance benchmarks. I want documentation that would allow any developer to understand and maintain your work." I spent weeks creating detailed documentation, explaining not just what I had built, but why I had made specific design decisions, and how different components interacted with each other. The documentation filled hundreds of pages and represented a complete blueprint for the most sophisticated healthcare application I had ever encountered. I assumed Derek wanted this documentation for future maintenance and enhancement of the system, a reasonable request for any complex software project. During this period, I began noticing subtle changes in how Derek interacted with the rest of the development team. He started scheduling one-on-one meetings with other developers, asking them detailed questions about my work, and requesting that they familiarize themselves with the components I had built. When I asked about these meetings, Derek explained that he was ensuring knowledge transfer and reducing our dependence on any single developer. Maya, you've done incredible work on Phoenix, but we need to make sure that other team members can step in if necessary, Derek said. What if you get sick or decide to take a vacation? We can't have critical project components that only one person understands. His explanation made sense from a project management perspective, but something about his tone and body language made me uncomfortable. There was an intensity in his eyes when he talked about my code, almost like hunger or possessiveness. I began keeping more detailed records of my work, backing up not just my code but also my design documents, meeting notes, and email correspondence to personal storage accounts that Derek couldn't access. As we entered the final 3 months before the Health Tech Summit demonstration, the entire company shifted into launch preparation mode. The marketing team began developing promotional materials, the sales team started reaching out to potential customers, and the executive team ramped up their investor relations activities. Phoenix was going to be unveiled at the summit's main keynote presentation, with Derek scheduled to demonstrate the application to an audience of thousands of healthcare professionals, technology investors, and industry analysts. The stakes could not have been higher. A successful launch would establish Health Tech Innovations as a major player in the healthcare technology space, potentially leading to acquisition offers worth hundreds of millions of dollars or public offering opportunities that could make early employees wealthy. A failed launch would likely mean the end of the company, as investors pulled their funding and customers lost confidence in our ability to deliver on our promises. Derek began holding rehearsals for his keynote presentation, practicing his demonstration of Phoenix in the company's main conference room in front of increasingly large audiences of employees, advisors, invited guests. I watched these rehearsals with growing amazement and horror as Derek presented my code, my architectural decisions, and my innovative solutions as his own creative work. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing here is the result of 3 years of intensive research and development, Derek would say as he navigated through the application interface I had designed. Every aspect of this system has been carefully crafted to address the real-world needs of healthcare providers. The artificial intelligence components you see here represent cutting-edge machine learning algorithms that I developed specifically for medical diagnostic applications. End quote. He was lying with such confidence and technical fluency that even I sometimes found myself questioning my own memories. Derek described the authentication system I had built as his innovative approach to healthcare security. He claimed credit for the database optimizations that had taken me months to perfect. He presented the user interface design I had sweated over as evidence of his deep understanding of healthcare workflows. During one particularly elaborate rehearsal in front of the company's board of directors, Derek spent 45 minutes walking through Phoenix's features, explaining the technical innovations and design philosophy behind each component. Not once did he mention my name or acknowledge my contributions to the project. Instead, he consistently used phrases like, "I developed," "my approach," and "my architectural vision." After the presentation, board members approached Derek with enthusiastic congratulations. "Derek, this is absolutely incredible," said Margaret Thompson, the board's chairwoman and a former healthcare executive. "The level of sophistication and attention to detail is remarkable. You've clearly outdone yourself with this project." "Thank you, Margaret," Derek replied with a modest smile. "It's been a challenging project, but I'm proud of what we've accomplished. I think Phoenix is going to revolutionize how healthcare providers think about technology. I sat in the back of the conference room, watching this exchange with a mixture of rage and disbelief. 3 years of my life, 18 months of 16-hour days, weekends and holidays sacrificed to build something truly innovative, and Derek was claiming all the credit without a moment's hesitation or shame. I wanted to stand up and scream the truth, to demand recognition for my work, but I was paralyzed by the political realities of corporate life and the fear of career suicide. After the board meeting, Jennifer approached me in the hallway outside the conference room. She looked troubled and avoided making direct eye contact as she spoke. "Maya, can we talk privately for a few minutes?" We walked to a quiet corner of the office, away from the post-presentation celebration that was developing around Derek. Jennifer seemed to be struggling with something, starting and stopping several times before finally finding her words. "Maya, I've been with this company for 5 years, and I've never seen anything like what just happened in there," Jennifer said quietly. "Everyone in the development team knows that Phoenix is primarily your work. Derek may have provided high-level guidance, but you built the heart and soul of that application. What he just did in there was wrong, and I want you to know that I see it." The validation from Jennifer was both comforting and heartbreaking. It confirmed that I wasn't losing my mind or misremembering my contributions to the project, but it also highlighted how powerless I was to change the situation. Derek held all the cards. He was the CTO, he controlled the narrative around Phoenix, and he had the full support of the board and executive team. "Jennifer, what should I do?" I asked. "I can't just let him take credit for 3 years of my work. This application is going to define my entire career, one way or another." Jennifer looked around nervously before responding. "Maya, I wish I had better advice for you, but the reality is that Derek has positioned himself very cleverly. He's been careful to frame all the technical decisions as his own, and he's the one with the relationships and the credibility to present Phoenix to the world. Fighting him directly would be career suicide, not just at this company, but potentially in the entire industry. So I should just accept it? Let him steal my work and pretend it never happened?" "I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to be strategic about how you handle this. Document everything, keep records of your contributions, and look for opportunities to tell your story when the timing is right. But picking a fight with Derek right now, 3 months before the biggest product launch in the company's history, is not going to end well for you." Jennifer's advice was pragmatic but deeply unsatisfying. I understood the political realities she was describing, but accepting them felt like betraying everything I believed about fairness, merit, and professional integrity. I had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to simply roll over and accept Derek's theft of my career-defining achievement. That night, I went home to my small apartment and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, reviewing the codebase I had spent 18 months building. Buried deep in the authentication module, in a section that handled token validation for administrative users, I found exactly what I was looking for: a single line of code that I had added months earlier as a plugin, debugging tool, and never removed. The line was innocuous enough that it would never be noticed during code reviews or routine maintenance, but it gave me the ability to remotely disable authentication for high-level administrative functions. With one carefully crafted API call from my personal laptop, I could cause Phoenix to reject login attempts from demonstration accounts during Derek's keynote presentation. The application wouldn't crash catastrophically, but it would fail in exactly the way that would be most embarrassing during a live demonstration. Users wouldn't be able to log in, making it impossible to show off any of Phoenix's impressive functionality. I stared at that line of code for hours, weighing the potential consequences of using it. Sabotaging Derek's presentation would be career suicide if I was caught, but it might also be the only way to expose the truth about who had really built Phoenix. If the demonstration failed and Derek couldn't explain the technical issues, questions would inevitably be raised about his actual involvement in the project's development. Over the following weeks, I began preparing for multiple scenarios. I continued working on Phoenix as if nothing had changed, fixing bugs, optimizing performance, and preparing for the launch. But I also began documenting my contributions in ways that would be difficult for Derek to dispute or suppress. I compiled commit logs showing that 90% of Phoenix's codebase had been written by me. I gathered email conversations where Derek had asked me to explain technical concepts that he later claimed to have invented. I created detailed timelines showing how different features had been developed and by whom. Most importantly, I began reaching out to contacts at other healthcare technology companies, testing the job market and building relationships that might prove crucial if my current situation became untenable. I scheduled coffee meetings with former colleagues, attended industry networking events, and quietly let it be known that I might be interested in new opportunities. I wanted to have options available if confronting Derek about his dishonesty led to termination or blacklisting within health tech innovations. The final month before the Health Tech Summit was a blur of preparation, rehearsals, and mounting tension. Derek became increasingly controlling and paranoid, demanding that all technical documentation be stored on company servers that he controlled and requiring approval for any external communications about Phoenix. He seemed to sense that something was amiss but couldn't identify the specific threat to his narrative. "Maya, I need you to focus entirely on Phoenix for the next 4 weeks," Derek told me during what would be our final one-on-one meeting. "No outside projects, no conference calls with other companies, no distractions of any kind. This launch is going to make or break all of our careers, and I need to know that you're completely committed to our success." The irony of Derek lecturing me about commitment to our success while planning to take full credit for my work was almost too much to bear. I nodded and smiled, assuring him that Phoenix was my top priority and that I would do everything possible to ensure a successful launch. Technically, I was telling the truth. I was completely focused on Phoenix's launch, just not in the way Derek expected. 3 days before the Health Tech Summit, Derek gathered the entire development team for a final team meeting. He thanked everyone for their hard work and dedication, emphasizing how Phoenix represented the culmination of months of collaborative effort under his technical leadership. He handed out small bonuses and promised that everyone would be recognized for their contributions to the project's success. "I know this has been a challenging project for everyone," Derek said as the meeting concluded. "Long hours, tight deadlines, and complex technical problems. But what we've built together is truly revolutionary, and I'm proud to represent our team's work at the summit. Phoenix is going to change the healthcare industry, and every one of you has played a part in making that possible." As my colleagues filed out of the conference room, chatting excitedly about the upcoming launch and their potential career advancement, I remained seated at the table, staring at Derek as he gathered his presentation materials. He looked confident, relaxed, and completely comfortable with the narrative he had constructed around Phoenix. In his mind, he had successfully positioned himself as the visionary architect behind the most important product in the company's history. "Maya, is everything okay?" Derek asked, noticing that I hadn't left with the others. "You look like you have something on your mind." I met his gaze directly, allowing myself a small smile that I hoped conveyed confidence rather than the mixture of anger and anticipation I was actually feeling. "Everything's perfect, Derek. I can't wait to see how Phoenix is received at the summit. I have a feeling it's going to be a presentation that everyone remembers. The Health Tech Summit took place at the Austin Convention Center, a massive facility that had been transformed into a showcase for the latest innovations in healthcare technology. Thousands of attendees wandered through exhibition halls filled with cutting-edge medical devices, software demonstrations, and presentations from industry leaders. The energy was electric, with the kind of excitement that only came from an industry on the verge of major transformation. Derek's keynote presentation was scheduled for the second day of the conference in the main auditorium that seated over 3,000 people. The presentation had been promoted for months as the unveiling of a revolutionary healthcare platform that would fundamentally change how medical professionals accessed and used patient data. Industry analysts, venture capitalists, and healthcare executives had traveled from around the world to see Phoenix demonstrated for the first time. I arrived at the convention center early on the morning of Derek's presentation, ostensibly to provide technical support in case any issues arose during the demonstration. In reality, I wanted to be present to witness the moment when months of planning and preparation either paid off spectacularly or backfired in the most public way possible. I found a seat in the auditorium's technical area, where I had a clear view of both the stage and the audience, while remaining inconspicuous among the other support staff. As the auditorium filled with attendees, I opened my laptop and navigated to the administrative interface I had built for Phoenix. The system was running smoothly, handling the background processing and data synchronization that would be crucial for Derek's demonstration. Everything appeared to be working perfectly, exactly as I had designed it to work 18 months earlier. Derek appeared on stage at exactly 9 a.m., looking confident and polished in his tailored suit and wireless microphone. He began his presentation with an overview of the challenges facing healthcare technology, describing the fragmentation, inefficiency, and user experience problems that plagued existing systems. His opening remarks were well-crafted and compelling, setting up Phoenix as the comprehensive solution that the industry had been waiting for. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to show you the future of healthcare technology, Derek announced to the packed auditorium. What you're about to see represents 3 years of intensive development and innovation. Phoenix isn't just another healthcare application. It's a complete reimagining of how medical professionals interact with patient data, diagnostic tools, and treatment protocols, end quote. The audience was clearly engaged, leaning forward in their seats as Derek began navigating through Phoenix's interface on the large screens flanking the stage. He started with the patient management components, showing how healthcare providers could access comprehensive medical histories, lab results, and treatment plans through an intuitive, streamlined interface. The demonstration was flawless, with Phoenix responding quickly and smoothly to every input. I watched Derek present my user interface designs, my database optimizations, and my integration work as his own innovative solutions. He described the artificial intelligence components I had developed as breakthrough algorithms that he had created specifically for medical diagnostic applications. He claimed credit for the mobile architecture I had designed, the security protocols I had implemented, and the performance optimizations that had taken me months to perfect. For 30 minutes, Derek's presentation proceeded exactly as rehearsed. Phoenix performed beautifully, showcasing the sophisticated functionality and intuitive design that had consumed 18 months of my life. The audience was clearly impressed, with many attendees taking photos and videos of the demonstration to share with colleagues who couldn't attend the conference. Then, Derek reached the portion of his presentation where he needed to demonstrate Phoenix's administrative capabilities. The advanced features that hospital administrators would use to manage user accounts, configure system settings, and generate compliance reports. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The point where Derek would need to log in with administrative credentials to access the most sophisticated components of the application. I positioned my fingers over my laptop keyboard and took a deep breath. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, and everything I believed about professional integrity came down to the next few seconds. With one carefully crafted API call, I could expose Derek's fraud and reclaim credit for my work. Or I could destroy my own career in the process. Derek clicked on the administrative login screen, entering the demonstration credentials that our team had prepared for the presentation. The login form appeared to process his request normally, with the familiar spinning indicator that showed Phoenix was validating his authentication. But instead of granting access to the administrative dashboard, the system returned an error message. Authentication failed. Please verify your credentials and try again. Derek's confident smile faltered slightly, but he maintained his composure. Let me try that again, he said with a casual laugh. Even the most sophisticated systems occasionally have hiccups. He re-entered the credentials, typing more slowly and carefully to ensure accuracy. Once again, Phoenix rejected the login attempt with the same error message. A murmur of concern began spreading through the auditorium as attendees realized that something was wrong with the demonstration. Well, this is embarrassing, Derek said, his voice beginning to show signs of strain. Let me try a different approach. He attempted to log in with several different credential sets, each time receiving the same authentication failure message. The murmur in the audience grew louder, with some attendees beginning to shift uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the polished, flawless demonstration they had expected from a company claiming to revolutionize healthcare technology. Derek looked toward the technical support area where I was sitting, his eyes scanning for someone who could help resolve the issue. I remained perfectly still, maintaining the neutral, concerned expression of a support technician who was just as puzzled by the technical difficulties as everyone else in the auditorium. Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be experiencing some unexpected technical difficulties, Derek announced, his confident presentation demeanor beginning to crack. These things happen in live demonstrations, as anyone in the technology industry can tell you. Let me see if I can resolve this quickly. But Derek couldn't resolve the issue because he didn't understand the code well enough to diagnose the problem. The authentication failure I had triggered was specifically designed to be mysterious and difficult to troubleshoot without deep knowledge of the system architecture. Derek could attempt different credentials, restart the application, or even reboot the demonstration server, but none of those actions would restore access to the administrative functions. As minutes passed and Derek's attempts to resolve the issue became increasingly desperate, the mood in the auditorium shifted from disappointment to skepticism. Industry professionals who had traveled across the country to see this revolutionary healthcare platform were watching a company's CTO struggle with basic technical problems during his own product demonstration. Whispered conversations began breaking out throughout the audience as attendees questioned whether Phoenix was really as sophisticated and reliable as Derek had claimed. I'm going to need a few more minutes to resolve this issue, Derek said, his voice now clearly showing stress and frustration. Perhaps we could take a brief intermission while my technical team investigates the problem. Conference organizers rushed onto the stage to discuss options with Derek, but the damage was already done. A keynote presentation that was supposed to establish health tech innovations as an industry leader had devolved into an embarrassing technical failure broadcast to thousands of healthcare professionals and potential investors. Social media posts about the failed demonstration were already beginning to appear, with attendees sharing photos and videos of Derek's increasingly panicked attempts to salvage his presentation. During the intermission, Derek huddled with several other health tech innovations executives who had attended the conference to support the launch. I could see them gesturing animatedly, clearly trying to determine whether the presentation could be salvaged or if they needed to cut their losses and end the demonstration early. Derek kept glancing toward the technical support area, obviously frustrated that his supposed technical expertise wasn't sufficient to resolve the issue. After 20 minutes, the conference organizers announced that Derek's presentation would resume, giving Phoenix one final opportunity to demonstrate its capabilities. Derek returned to the stage, looking considerably less confident than when he had begun the presentation an hour earlier. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience," Derek said. "We've identified the source of the authentication issue and believe we've resolved the problem. Let's continue with the demonstration." Derek attempted to log in to the administrative interface once more, and once again, Phoenix rejected his credentials with the same error message. This time, the audience's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Disappointed sighs, frustrated grumbling, and the sound of people beginning to leave the auditorium filled the air. Derek's career-defining moment was collapsing in real time, broadcast to an audience of industry professionals who would remember this failure for years to come. "I apologize, but we're going to need to end today's demonstration," Derek announced, his voice barely concealing his desperation and humiliation. "Obviously, this doesn't represent the normal performance of Phoenix, which has been tested extensively and performs flawlessly in our production environment. We'll be following up with detailed technical information for anyone interested in learning more about our platform." As Derek left the stage and the audience filed out of the auditorium, I quietly closed my laptop and headed for the exit. The first phase of my plan had succeeded beyond my expectations. Derek's reputation as a technical visionary had been severely damaged, and serious questions were now being raised about his actual involvement in Phoenix's development. But the most important part of my strategy was still to come. I needed to ensure that the truth about Phoenix's development came to light before Derek could spin the failed demonstration as a minor technical glitch. Within hours of the failed presentation, technology blogs and industry publications were reporting on Derek's embarrassing keynote disaster. Headlines like, "Health Tech Innovations Revolutionary Platform Crashes During Launch Demo," and "CTO Unable to Troubleshoot His Own Product During Major Conference," began appearing across the internet. The story was particularly damaging because it played into existing skepticism about healthcare technology startups and their tendency to overpromise and underdeliver. Derek and the Health Tech Innovations executive team went into crisis management mode, scheduling emergency board meetings and damage control sessions with investors and potential customers. The failed demonstration had created a cascade of problems that extended far beyond simple embarrassment. Several major hospital systems that had been considering Phoenix for pilot programs put their evaluations on hold. Venture capital firms that had been discussing additional funding rounds began asking pointed questions about the company's technical capabilities and leadership. I watched these developments unfold from my desk at Health Tech Innovations, maintaining the facade of a concerned employee while secretly documenting every aspect of the crisis. Derek was clearly struggling to explain what had gone wrong during the demonstration, offering vague explanations about unexpected server configurations and authentication protocol conflicts that satisfied no one who understood software development. 3 days after the failed keynote, Derek called an all-hands meeting to address the situation with the entire company. Employees packed into the main conference room, their faces reflecting a mixture of concern, confusion, and fear about the company's future. The failed demonstration had become industry news, and everyone understood that Health Tech Innovations' reputation and viability were now in serious jeopardy. "Team, I know you've all heard about the technical difficulties we experienced at the Health Tech Summit," Derek began, his usual confidence replaced by visible strain and exhaustion. "I want to be transparent with everyone about what happened and what we're doing to address the situation. Derek proceeded to offer the same unconvincing explanations he had been giving to investors and board members. He claimed that the authentication failure was caused by unforeseen incompatibilities between Phoenix and the conference center's network infrastructure. He suggested that the demonstration environment hadn't been properly configured to handle the specific security protocols that Phoenix required. He insisted that the underlying technology was sound and that the issues were purely environmental. The bottom line is that Phoenix works perfectly in our production environment, Derek concluded. What happened at the summit was an unfortunate technical glitch that doesn't reflect the quality or reliability of our platform. We're already working with several major healthcare systems to schedule private demonstrations where we can show Phoenix operating under optimal conditions. As Derek opened the floor for questions, I saw an opportunity to begin Phase 2 of my plan. I raised my hand and waited for Derek to acknowledge me before speaking. Derek, I've been analyzing the authentication logs from the demonstration, and I'm seeing some patterns that don't match your explanation about network incompatibilities, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Professional. The error messages seem to be coming from our authentication module rather than network-level issues. Would it be helpful if I prepared a detailed technical analysis of what went wrong? Derek's eyes narrowed slightly as he processed my question. He understood that I was offering to investigate the very system failure that had destroyed his keynote presentation. But he couldn't refuse without appearing to discourage technical problem-solving. That's a good idea, Maya, Derek replied after a moment's hesitation. Why don't you prepare a comprehensive analysis, and we can review it together before sharing it with the board? Actually, given the urgency of the situation and the board's concerns about our technical capabilities, maybe it would be better if I presented my findings directly to them, I suggested. That way, they can ask detailed questions about the authentication architecture and get immediate answers from the person who built it. The conference room fell silent as the implications of my statement sank in. I had just publicly claimed credit for building Phoenix's authentication system, directly contradicting Derek's narrative about his own technical leadership. Derek's face flushed red as he realized that his carefully constructed mythology was being challenged in front of the entire company. Maya, I think there might be some confusion about roles and responsibilities, Derek said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. While you certainly contributed to the authentication module, the overall architecture and design were my responsibility as CTO. Of course, Derek. I'm just saying that since I implemented the specific code that handles administrative login validation, I might be able to provide detailed insights into why it failed during the demonstration, I replied, maintaining my professional tone while subtly reinforcing my claim to ownership of the critical system component. Jennifer, who had been watching this exchange with growing concern, tried to diffuse the bull. Tension. Perhaps we should schedule a separate technical review meeting where we can analyze the authentication issues in detail, she suggested. That might be more productive than trying to troubleshoot complex technical problems in front of the entire company. But it was too late to contain the situation. Other developers in the room were beginning to exchange meaningful glances as they processed what I had just implied about the true nature of Phoenix's development. Several team members who had worked closely with me on different components of the application were starting to piece together the broader picture of how Derek had positioned himself to take credit for work he hadn't actually performed. Derek attempted to, quote, regain control of the meeting, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt about his technical contributions had been planted in front of the entire company, and it would be impossible to prevent that doubt from growing and spreading. As the meeting concluded and employees filed out of the conference room, I could hear whispered conversations starting among small groups of colleagues. Over the following days, The atmosphere at Health Tech Innovations became increasingly tense and paranoid. Derek seemed to sense that his position was under threat, but he couldn't identify the specific source of the danger or develop an effective strategy to address it. He scheduled a series of one-on-one meetings with key team members, apparently trying to assess their loyalty and gather intelligence about potential challenges to his authority. When Derek called me into his office for what would be our final private conversation, I could see the stress and suspicion in his eyes. He looked like a man who was beginning to realize that his carefully constructed house of cards might be starting to collapse. "Maya, I need to ask you directly about some concerns I'm having," Derek said, closing his office door and gesturing for me to sit across from his desk. "Your comment during the all-hands meeting about building the authentication system seemed to suggest that you think you deserve more credit for Phoenix than you've been receiving." I met his gaze directly, no longer bothering to hide my contempt for his dishonesty. "Derek, I think we both know exactly how much of Phoenix I built. The question is whether you're going to continue pretending that you wrote 90% of the code base, or if you're going to start giving credit where credit is due." Derek's composure finally cracked completely. "Maya, you need to be very careful about the accusations you're making. I've been nothing but supportive of your career development, and I won't tolerate insubordination or attempts to undermine my authority." "Insubordination?" "Derek, I spent 18 months building Phoenix while you took credit for my work. I created the artificial intelligence components, the user interface, the database architecture, the mobile integration, and yes, the authentication system that failed during your keynote. The only thing you contributed to this project was taking credit for other people's innovations." "That's absolutely not true, Maya. I provided the overall technical vision and architectural guidance that made Phoenix possible. Individual contributors like you implemented specific components under my direction, but I was responsible for the strategic decisions and technical leadership that brought everything together." I laughed bitterly at Derek's attempt to reframe his theft as collaborative leadership. "Derek, I have commit logs showing that I wrote 90% of Phoenix's code base. I have email conversations where you asked me to explain technical concepts that you later claimed to have invented. I have documentation proving that every major architectural decision came from me, not from you." Derek leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. "Maya, even if some of your claims were accurate, which they're not, you need to think very carefully about your next steps. I control your career trajectory at this company, and I have significant influence throughout the healthcare technology industry. Making false accusations against me would be career suicide." "False accusations?" "Derek, everything I've said can be verified through technical documentation and source code analysis. The board is already asking questions about what went wrong at the summit. How long do you think it will take them to figure out that the CTO couldn't troubleshoot his own authentication system because he didn't actually build it?" Derek stood up from his desk and walked to his office window, staring out at the Austin skyline as he processed the implications of our conversation. When he turned back to face me, his expression was a mixture of desperation and rage. "Maya, let me be very clear about something. Phoenix represents the future of this company and the careers of everyone who works here. If you do anything to undermine confidence in our technical capabilities or leadership structure, you'll be destroying not just my career but the livelihoods of 50 other employees. Is your ego really worth that much collateral damage?" "This isn't about ego, Derek. This is about professional integrity and taking responsibility for your own work. You built your entire reputation on innovations that other people created. That's not leadership, that's Get out of my office, Maya." And think very carefully about whether you want to continue working at this company, because your attitude and accusations are completely unacceptable. I left Derek's office knowing that our relationship had reached a point of no return. There would be no peaceful resolution, no quiet acknowledgement of my contributions, and no voluntary sharing of credit for Phoenix's development. Derek had made it clear that he intended to maintain his false narrative regardless of the consequences, which meant that I would need to pursue more aggressive strategies to expose the truth. That evening, I began preparing the comprehensive technical analysis that I had promised during the all-hands meeting. But instead of simply diagnosing the authentication failure that had occurred during Derek's keynote, I compiled a complete record of Phoenix's development history. I gathered commit logs showing the authorship of every major component, email threads documenting my architectural decisions, and performance benchmarks proving that my optimizations had transformed Derek's original specifications into a production-ready application. The analysis filled over 200 pages and provided irrefutable evidence of my primary role in Phoenix's development. I included detailed code samples, architectural diagrams, and technical explanations that demonstrated my deep understanding of every aspect of the application. Most importantly, I documented the specific authentication module failure that had crashed Derek's demonstration, explaining exactly why it had occurred and how it could be prevented in the future. I also prepared a separate document outlining Derek's pattern of taking credit for other people's work, including specific examples of him claiming to have invented techniques and algorithms that were well documented in academic literature or industry publications. This pattern of behavior suggested that his theft of credit for Phoenix was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader approach to building his reputation through other people's achievements. Armed with this documentation, I requested a meeting with Margaret Thompson, the chairwoman of Health Tech Innovation's board of directors. Margaret had been asking pointed questions about the company's technical capabilities since the failed keynote demonstration, and I suspected she might be receptive to hearing the truth about Phoenix's development. Margaret agreed to meet with me the following afternoon, scheduling our conversation for a coffee shop near the Health Tech Innovations office. I arrived early and chose a quiet corner table where we could speak privately without being overheard by colleagues or competitors. Maya, Derek mentioned that you've been working on an analysis of what went wrong during the keynote demonstration, Margaret said as she settled into the chair across from me. I have to tell you, the board is very concerned about the technical issues we experienced at the summit. We need to understand what happened and how we can prevent similar problems in the future. Margaret, I do have a comprehensive technical analysis of the authentication failure, but I think there are some broader issues that the board needs to understand about Phoenix's development, I replied, placing my documentation on the table between us. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear, but it's important for the company's future. Over the next hour, I walked Margaret through the evidence I had compiled, explaining how Derek had systematically taken credit for work he hadn't performed. I showed her the commit logs proving that I had written the vast majority of Phoenix's codebase. I explained the technical decisions Derek had claimed as his own innovations, demonstrating through code samples and architectural diagrams that these innovations had actually originated from my research and, quote, development work. Margaret listened intently, asking detailed questions about the technical evidence and taking careful notes about the timeline of Phoenix's development. As a former healthcare executive with an MBA from Stanford, she understood the business implications of what I was describing even if she couldn't evaluate the technical details independently. Maya, these are very serious allegations, Margaret said when I finished my presentation. If what you're telling me is accurate, it suggests that Derek has fundamentally misrepresented his role in Phoenix's development to the board, to investors, and to the entire industry. Margaret, I understand how serious this is, and I wouldn't be bringing it to your attention if I wasn't absolutely certain about the facts. Every claim I've made can be verified through source code analysis, email records, and technical documentation. Derek built his keynote presentation around innovations that I developed, and when the authentication system failed, he couldn't troubleshoot it because he didn't understand how it worked. Margaret reviewed several pages of my documentation, focusing particularly on the commit logs and email threads that provided clear evidence of my technical contributions. As someone who had managed technology teams during her corporate career, she understood the significance of the patterns I was showing her. Maya, I need to ask you a difficult question. Why are you bringing this to me now, after the keynote failure, rather than earlier in Phoenix's development cycle? Some people might suggest that you're only making these claims because Derek's presentation didn't go well. I had anticipated this question and prepared a careful response. Margaret, I tried to address these issues through normal channels first. I raised concerns about technical decisions during development meetings, but Derek dismissed them. I documented my contributions through proper version control and email communications, assuming that my work would be appropriately recognized when Phoenix launched. It was only when I watched Derek present my innovations as his own creative work that I realized how seriously he had misrepresented the quote, development process, and the authentication failure during the keynote. Do you know what caused that specific issue? This was the moment I had been preparing for since the night I first discovered the line of code that could disable Derek's demonstration. I could tell Margaret the complete truth about my deliberate sabotage, which would undermine my credibility and potentially expose me to legal liability. Or I could offer a technically accurate but incomplete explanation that would allow her to draw her own conclusions. The authentication failure was caused by a debug flag that was accidentally left enabled in the production configuration, I said, which was technically true even though it didn't explain how the flag had been activated. It's the kind of issue that would be immediately obvious to someone who understood the authentication architecture, but difficult to diagnose without deep knowledge of the code. Margaret nodded, apparently satisfied with my explanation. Maya, I'm going to need to discuss this situation with the other board members and decide how to proceed. In the meantime, I need you to keep this conversation confidential. Don't discuss these allegations with other employees or anyone outside the company until we've had a chance to investigate properly. End quote. Of course, Margaret. I understand the sensitivity of the situation. One more question, Maya. What outcome are you hoping for from this conversation? What do you want the board to do with this information? I had thought carefully about this question and prepared an answer that balanced my desire for justice with realistic expectations about corporate politics. Margaret, I want the board to understand the truth about Phoenix's development so that they can make informed decisions about the company's technical leadership and future direction. I'm not necessarily asking for Derek to be terminated, but I do think the company needs technical leadership that's based on actual expertise rather than taking credit for other people's work. End quote. After Margaret left the coffee shop, I returned to the office and attempted to maintain normal working relationships with my colleagues, while knowing that I had potentially triggered events that could transform the entire company. Derek seemed to sense that something had shifted in the office dynamics, watching me carefully during meetings and conversations, as if trying to determine what I might be planning next. 3 days later, Margaret called me to schedule a follow-up meeting, this time in the Health Tech Innovations conference room with 2 other board members present. She explained that the board had decided to conduct a formal investigation into the concerns I had raised, and that they would need detailed technical testimony from me about Phoenix's development. The investigation meeting included Margaret, board member Dr. Robert Chen, a former CTO at a major healthcare system, and Sarah Mitchell, a venture capitalist who specialized in healthcare technology investments. All three board members had extensive experience in technology leadership and would be capable of evaluating the technical evidence I had compiled. Maya, we've reviewed the preliminary documentation you provided to Margaret, and we'd like you to walk us through the specific technical contributions you made to Phoenix, Dr. Chen said. We're particularly interested in understanding the architectural decisions and innovative components that differentiate Phoenix from other healthcare applications. For the next 2 hours, I provided detailed explanations of Phoenix's technical architecture, demonstrating my deep understanding of every major component and design decision. I explained the artificial intelligence algorithms I had developed for diagnostic assistance, the database optimizations that enabled real-time performance at scale, and the security implementations that exceeded industry standards for healthcare data protection. Dr. Chen asked probing technical questions that would have been impossible for someone without genuine expertise to answer convincingly. He wanted to understand the specific machine learning techniques I had used for symptom analysis, the database indexing strategies I had implemented for complex medical queries, and the encryption protocols I had chosen for mobile data synchronization. Maya, your technical knowledge is clearly very impressive, Dr. Chen said when I finished my presentation. But we need to understand Derek's role in this process as well. Surely he provided some level of technical guidance and architectural oversight. Dr. Chen, Derek did provide high-level project requirements and business objectives, which are important contributions to any software development effort, I replied diplomatically. But the specific technical innovations and architectural decisions that make Phoenix unique were primarily my work. Derek's original specifications would have resulted in an application with significant performance and scalability limitations. Sarah Mitchell leaned forward with interest. Maya, can you give us specific examples of where your technical decisions differed from Derek's original specifications, and what the impact of those decisions was on Phoenix's capabilities? I provided several detailed examples showing how Derek's initial database schema would have created performance bottlenecks, how his proposed API structure would have limited integration capabilities, and how his security model would have failed to meet healthcare compliance requirements. In each case, I had quietly implemented superior solutions while allowing Derek to believe that his specifications were being followed. The artificial intelligence components are probably the best example, I explained. Derek's original requirements called for basic keyword matching and simple rule-based logic. What I actually built was a sophisticated machine learning system that can analyze patient symptoms, reference medical literature, and suggest potential diagnoses with remarkable accuracy. The difference between what Derek specified and what I delivered is the difference between a basic database application and a truly revolutionary healthcare platform. After the technical review concluded, the board members asked me to wait in the hallway while they discussed their findings privately. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair for nearly an hour, knowing that the next conversation would determine not just my own career future, but potentially the entire trajectory of health tech innovations. When Margaret finally called me back into the conference room, the expressions on the board members' faces suggested that they had reached a significant decision. Dr. Chen looked particularly grave, while Sarah Mitchell appeared to be suppressing anger about something she had discovered during their deliberations. Maya, we've completed our initial investigation, and we're convinced that your account of Phoenix's development is accurate, Margaret said. We've also had some very concerning conversations with Derek about his technical contributions to the project. It's become clear that he has significantly misrepresented his role in Phoenix's creation. Dr. Chen nodded grimly. Maya, When we asked Derek to explain the technical architecture decisions you described, he was unable to provide coherent answers. He couldn't explain the machine learning algorithms, the database optimization strategies, or even the basic security protocols. For someone who claims to have designed these systems, his lack of technical knowledge is frankly shocking. End quote. We've also discovered that this isn't the first time Derek has taken credit for other people's work, Sarah Mitchell added, her voice tight with anger. We've found several instances over the past 2 years where he presented technical solutions developed by other team members as his own innovations. This appears to be a pattern of behavior rather than an isolated incident. Margaret leaned forward across the conference table. Maya, the board has decided to make some immediate changes to address this situation. Derek will be terminated from his position as CTO, effective immediately. We're offering you the opportunity to step into the role of interim CTO while we conduct a formal search for permanent technical leadership. The offer was both thrilling and terrifying. I had dreamed of leading a technology team and having the authority to make architectural decisions without interference from incompetent managers. But accepting the CTO position would also mean taking responsibility for Phoenix's success or failure, leading a team through a critical period in the company's development, and proving that my technical expertise could translate into effective leadership. I'm honored by the offer, Margaret, but I want to make sure I understand the expectations and timeline, I replied. Phoenix still needs significant work before it's ready for commercial deployment, and the failed keynote demonstration has created some serious credibility challenges for the company. Maya, we're not expecting you to solve all of health tech innovation's problems overnight, Dr. Chen said with a slight smile. But we need technical leadership from someone who actually understands the technology we're building. Your expertise with Phoenix makes you the obvious choice to guide its continued development. Sarah Mitchell nodded in agreement. Maya, we're also prepared to offer you a significant equity stake in the company and a compensation package that reflects the value of your contributions to Phoenix's development. You've been severely undercompensated for work that's going to define this company's future. I accepted the interim CTO position, understanding that it represented both an incredible opportunity and an enormous challenge. Within 24 hours, Derek had been escorted from the building and I was sitting in the office that had been his, reviewing the technical documentation and project plans that would guide Phoenix's path to commercial launch. The transition was not without complications. Several employees who had been loyal to Derek were suspicious of the sudden leadership change and skeptical about my ability to fill his role. Some team members questioned whether I had the management experience necessary to guide a complex software development project, while others worried that the company's instability would damage their own career prospects. I addressed these concerns through a series of team meetings where I outlined my vision for Phoenix's continued development and demonstrated my deep understanding of the technical challenges we faced. I acknowledged that I was new to management, but emphasized that I had been intimately involved in every aspect of Phoenix's development and understood the code base better than anyone else in the company. I know this transition has been disruptive and concerning for everyone, I told the assembled development team during my first all-hands meeting as interim CTO. But I want to assure you that Phoenix is technically sound and ready for the next phase of development. My goal is to build on the work we've already done while addressing the performance and reliability issues that became apparent during the keynote demonstration. Jennifer, who had watched the entire Derek situation unfold with mixture of relief and apprehension, became one of my strongest supporters during the transition period. Her experience and institutional knowledge were invaluable as I learned to navigate the management responsibilities that came with technical leadership. Maya, you've earned this opportunity through your technical contributions. But succeeding as CTO is going to require different skills than writing code, Jennifer advised during one of our weekly meetings. You'll need to communicate effectively with non-technical stakeholders, manage competing priorities, and make decisions that balance technical excellence with business realities. Her advice proved prophetic as I began working with the board, investors, and potential customers to rebuild confidence in health tech innovations' technical capabilities. The failed keynote demonstration had created lasting damage to the company's reputation, and several major prospects had suspended their evaluation processes pending resolution of concerns about our technical leadership and product reliability. My first major challenge as interim CTO was organizing a series of private demonstrations for key prospects, giving them the opportunity to see Phoenix operating properly under controlled conditions. These demonstrations were crucial for proving that the keynote failure had been an anomaly rather than a reflection of fundamental technical problems. The private demonstrations were overwhelmingly successful. Hospital administrators and healthcare technology directors were impressed by Phoenix's comprehensive functionality, intuitive interface, and sophisticated integration capabilities. Several prospects who had suspended their evaluations after the keynote failure resumed their procurement processes, and we began receiving inquiries from new organizations that had heard about Phoenix through industry networks. Maya, this is exactly what we needed, Margaret told me after a particularly successful demonstration for a major hospital system in Dallas. You're showing these prospects that health tech innovations has the technical expertise and product quality necessary to be a reliable partner for their critical healthcare applications. Within 3 months of becoming interim CTO, Phoenix had secured its first major commercial deployment, a pilot program with a regional hospital network that would serve as a proving ground for broader market adoption. The pilot was scheduled to begin 6 months later, giving us time to address the remaining technical issues identified during our quality assurance process. As the pilot deployment approached, the board made the decision to remove the interim designation from my title, officially promoting me to Chief Technology Officer with full authority over the company's technical strategy and development priorities. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, significant equity stake, and the resources necessary to expand the development team as Phoenix scaled to serve larger customer bases. Maya, your leadership during this transition period has been exceptional, Dr. Chen told me during the board meeting where my promotion was announced. You've not only restored confidence in our technical capabilities, but positioned the company for sustainable growth based on genuine innovation rather than hollow marketing claims. The irony was not lost on me that Derek's theft of credit for my work had ultimately led to my promotion to the position he had coveted. His dishonesty and lack of technical expertise had been exposed in the most public way possible, while my actual contributions to Phoenix's development had been recognized and rewarded with career advancement that would have taken years to achieve through normal channels. 6 months later, Phoenix's pilot deployment was generating remarkable results. Healthcare providers at the pilot sites reported significant improvements in patient care quality, operational efficiency, and user satisfaction compared to their previous systems. The artificial intelligence components I had developed were identifying potential diagnoses that human doctors had missed, while the integrated telemedicine capabilities were expanding access to specialized care in underserved areas. Industry publications began featuring Phoenix as a breakthrough application that demonstrated the potential for truly innovative healthcare technology. The same analysts and journalists who had criticized health tech innovations after Derek's failed keynote were now praising the company's technical vision and execution. Phoenix was selected as the winner of several industry awards, including Healthcare Application of the Year from the Medical Technology Association. Derek's career, meanwhile, had effectively ended. The healthcare technology industry was small enough that news of his termination and the reasons behind it had spread quickly through professional networks. Potential employers were aware of the fraud allegations and unwilling to risk hiring someone with his reputation for taking credit for other people's work. The last I heard, he was working in sales for a generic software company, far from the technical leadership positions he had once claimed to deserve. As I sat in my office 1 year after the failed keynote demonstration, reviewing the latest performance metrics from Phoenix's expanding customer base, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The decision to sabotage Derek's presentation had been risky and ethically complex, but it had ultimately exposed the truth about Phoenix's development and ensured that credit was given where it was due. Phoenix was now deployed at over 50 healthcare facilities across the country, with new implementations being added monthly. The application had processed millions of patient interactions, facilitated thousands of remote consultations, and assisted healthcare providers in making more accurate diagnoses. The technology I had developed during those 18 months of intensive coding was improving healthcare outcomes for real patients, fulfilling the dreams that had motivated me to enter the industry. More importantly, the experience had taught me valuable lessons about professional integrity, corporate politics, and the importance of documenting and defending your contributions in competitive environments. I had learned that technical excellence alone was not sufficient for career advancement, that you needed to be strategic about how you positioned yourself and your work within organizational power structures. As the current Chief Technology Officer of Health Tech Innovations, I made sure that all team members received appropriate credit for their contributions to our projects. Code reviews included attribution documentation, technical presentations acknowledged individual developers by name, and performance evaluations accurately reflected each person's specific contributions to team success. I was determined to create a culture where Derek's pattern of stealing credit would be impossible to sustain. The company continued to grow and evolve, with Phoenix serving as the foundation for additional healthcare applications and services. We expanded into artificial intelligence research, telemedicine platforms, and medical device integration, always maintaining the focus on genuine innovation and technical excellence that had made Phoenix successful. Jennifer, who had supported me throughout the transition to technical leadership, was promoted to Senior Vice President of Engineering, overseeing the expanded development teams that were now working on multiple product lines. Her guidance had been invaluable during my first year as CTO, and I was grateful to have her expertise and experience supporting the company's continued growth. Maya, do you ever regret how everything went down with Derek? Jennifer asked during one of our monthly strategy meetings. It was a dramatic way to resolve the situation, and it could have backfired badly if the board hadn't been receptive to hearing the truth. I considered her question carefully before responding. Jennifer, I regret that the situation became as contentious as it did, and I wish Derek had been willing to acknowledge other people's contributions without being forced to do so. But I don't regret standing up for the integrity of my work, ensuring that Phoenix's true development history was accurately represented. Too many people in this industry accept credit theft as an inevitable part of corporate life. What would you tell other developers who find themselves in similar situations? Document everything. Build allies who can vouch for your contributions. And don't assume that good work will automatically be recognized and rewarded. If someone is taking credit for your innovations, you need to be strategic about how you address the situation. But you also can't let it continue indefinitely. Your professional reputation is too important to sacrifice for the sake of avoiding conflict. The lessons from my experience with Derek had applications far beyond software development. In any collaborative professional environment, individuals needed to be vigilant about protecting their contributions and ensuring accurate attribution of their work. The temptation for managers and senior colleagues to appropriate credit for successful projects was strong, and resistance to that temptation required both personal integrity and organizational structures that encouraged honest recognition of individual contributions. As health tech innovations continued to expand and Phoenix gained recognition as a breakthrough healthcare application, I often thought about the alternative timeline where Derek's keynote presentation had succeeded and his false narrative about Phoenix's development had become accepted industry history. My innovations would have been attributed to him, my career would have remained stagnant, and the culture of credit theft would have been reinforced and perpetuated. Instead, the dramatic exposure of Derek's dishonesty had created a cautionary tale that resonated throughout the healthcare technology industry. The story of Phoenix's development became a case study in technical leadership, professional ethics, and the importance of accurate attribution in collaborative projects. Conference presentations and industry publications reference the health tech innovation situation as an example of how organizations could identify and address patterns of credit appropriation. The experience had transformed my understanding of professional relationships and career management. I had learned that technical expertise, while necessary, was not sufficient for career advancement in competitive environments. Success required strategic thinking, careful documentation, political awareness, and the willingness to advocate for your own contributions when others attempted to appropriate them. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the biggest risks in your career were worth taking if they were based on solid evidence and clear principles. The decision to expose Derek's fraud had been frightening and potentially career-ending, but it had ultimately led to opportunities and recognition that would have been impossible to achieve through conventional means. As I concluded this reflection on the events that had defined my career, I realized that the story of Phoenix's development would continue to evolve as the application expanded to serve more healthcare providers. Patience. The technology I had created during those intensive 18 months would continue to improve healthcare outcomes for years to come, a lasting legacy that no amount of credit theft could diminish. The failed keynote demonstration that had exposed Derek's dishonesty was now remembered as a turning point in health tech innovation's history. The moment when the company's leadership chose technical excellence and professional integrity over marketing hype and false claims. The authentication failure that had crashed Derek's presentation had ultimately authenticated the truth about Phoenix's development, ensuring that credit was finally given where it was due.